computers the way we have them now. Corey has called from Westminster to talk about cyber attacks and how ready we are. How ready do you think we are, Corey? You've worked in IT for 20 years.
Yeah, hi, Cher. I think the average user is basically a sitting duck for any kind of cyber criminal that's out there, or indeed the government just doing covert surveillance on them. People just don't understand how the internet works. They don't understand how the routers work. And the amount of effort that's required to understand that is beyond your average user. And there's probably not a lot that they can do. I heard you were speaking to Rob earlier before, and I think that's all exceptionally good advice. I think people should follow that.
I'll repeat it a couple of times in the hour, actually, so that people can...
Yeah, it's very, very good advice. Keep your systems updated. Use a good virus buster. But beyond that, once you have a Trojan inside your network, most people are totally vulnerable, because that will just punch straight through any firewall that's just generally available. And the amount of configuration that you need to stop that is just beyond the average user. And they're just vulnerable, totally vulnerable. And there's probably not a lot that can be done about that.
But when it comes to companies, how much more prepared are they? Individuals, yes, but companies?
It depends on the company and how much money they've got to deploy for IT security. So if they've got an IT security budget, they can employ lots of consultants, they can get a consensus of opinion of what to do. But your average small business, there's probably not a lot they're going to be able to do, because the cost of it and the cost of employing consultants is just too high. And the amount of expertise that you actually need to protect yourself is just beyond your small business, and they're not much different than the home user. They're focused on whatever their business is.
These particular kinds of attacks that we've seen since Friday, is it possible to guess the motivation of it? Is it mischief? Is it politics? Is it money?
It's money. Particularly the one that we've seen with the NHS is they want to extort money from people. From what I've read on the internet, they have used a weapon. They have weaponized a NSA toolkit that was leaked on the internet, and they've weaponized that into this ransomware system. And so they're trying to extort money in the form of bitcoins, which actually, to be perfectly honest, is beyond the average user to be able to know how to go onto the internet and purchase bitcoin. So there's kind of an irony in the way that they've tried to do this extortion.
And do you think we're just as likely to see politically motivated or mischief-motivated hacks, or is your guess that money is more to do with this than anything?
Well, certainly with the NHS attack, it's very, very clear what their motive was. Give us bitcoins, which we can then sell on the market and get money for. I think you might be talking about the kind of hacking that we're seeing by blaming Russia with interfering with Western democratic processes and so on, which I think is just a total crock, personally.
Why?
Why do I think that? Because I think people can individually go online now and make up their own minds about which way they're going to vote. Are we actually seriously saying that Russia has hacked our voting systems, our postal voting systems, and influenced the election directly, or are we saying it is some kind of socialization system that they're using? There's a whole different sort of debate to the actual...
It is, but it's an interesting one all the same, because Cambridge Analytica said that it is entirely possible, and they didn't quite... I think I'm right in saying they didn't quite say that this had happened, but that it's entirely possible for political campaigners from wherever to use open data about us that we ourselves put out there, probably, to decide exactly how to shape the political message that they send to us. So if they see from your Facebook and Twitter analysis that you are a person with a social conscience, essentially, they'll use that language. If they see your language is more fearful and introvert, they will use the language of protection and fighting and country and that kind of thing. Is that political meddling, or is that just politics?
Well, I think it's both. It's actually media and politics that's doing that. I mean, there's two things you're talking about with social networks. What social networks are doing, what the people who host the social networks are doing, Facebook and Twitter are probably the most prominent, is that they allow you to build your own echo chamber. So what is happening is you will connect with people that think the same way you do. You put something out there, someone will connect to you, they'll follow you, they'll befriend you. It's because you are saying something that they agree with. So you actually build this huge...
Yes, but you also get, if my experience is anything to go back, you also get lots of attention from people who vehemently disagree with you, and sometimes, you know, I'm not talking about trolls, I'm talking about just somebody who says, no way should this be happening in the election, this should, or that should, or this is the right policy, or that's the right policy. And that's just called debate, isn't it? It's not always an echo chamber.
Yeah, and there's nothing nefarious about any of that, so... I actually think that that's good. I think you'd be very worried if all you ever heard was all the same people telling you exactly the same thing. So that is very good. And actually, I think that is an argument against Russian influence or a third party manipulating you, because you do have encroaching into the echo chamber these alternative ideas. But it is a good thing. I think I think social media, I think the internet, despite the concerns we've got about cybersecurity, is actually the greatest thing that has ever happened in human history. It allows ordinary people to communicate in a way that they've never been able to do so before. An ordinary person at home has the reach of something like LBC, for example.
Anywhere, and also anywhere in the world you can listen to LBC or any other radio station you wish to. I agree with you, and it's worth reminding ourselves of the positives, isn't it, on a day like today?
I think there's a lot of fear around this, and actually they're calling it the NHS attack. Well, as you know, it wasn't targeted at the NHS. It was just a general ransomware that's put out there, and it's affected a lot of different companies. People are blaming Jeremy Hunt with this. I think that's unjustified, because the NHS were told about this vulnerability with XP. There was a privately available patch that was available, which, if the individual NHS trusts had acted on that and applied the patch, that would have fixed the problem. All
right, Corey, thank you. Corey, calling from Westminster there. Just to reiterate what the Home Secretary, Health Secretary, Jeremy Hunt, said in the last half hour or so. He said that a second spike in cyber attacks that had been feared had not hit the NHS. But some hospital trusts are still suffering ongoing disruption because of Friday's ransomware virus. Patients have been urged to use the NHS, quotes, wisely, as